The interview started with smiles but ended in complete chaos. Meghan Markle and Stephen Colbert just made late-night television history, and not in a good way. Why did the show cut to black? Why was Meghan escorted out by security? And what really happened on that stage? This story has America divided, and today, we're breaking down exactly what went down, moment by moment. Subscribe to stay updated with the most intense celebrity moments and media confrontations. They're getting more explosive by the day. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was Colbert out of line? Or was Meghan too defensive? It was supposed to be just another celebrity interview. A few questions, some lighthearted jokes, maybe a clip or two from an upcoming project. But by the end of the night, the entire room had gone silent. Not because of a standing ovation or a surprise announcement, but because of the moment that stopped the show. Meghan Markle and Stephen Colbert sat across from each other like any other guest and host on late-night television. The lights were warm, the band played her in, the audience clapped politely. But within minutes, the mood shifted. Smiles faded. The room felt colder. What began as small talk slowly turned into something much bigger, much deeper, and far more intense than anyone expected. Some are calling it a meltdown. Others are calling it the most honest conversation television has seen in years. But no matter where you stand, one thing is clear. This was not the interview anyone thought it would be. Before the cameras stopped rolling, Meghan Markle was escorted out of the building. And the world is still trying to piece together exactly what happened in that studio. We are going to walk through every step, the questions, the tension, the moment it all boiled over. You will hear what was said, how it was said, and why people are still talking about it. So stay with us. You will want to hear every word. And if you are new here, make sure to subscribe. Trust me, you will want to be here when the full footage drops. This is only the beginning. Stephen Colbert has built a reputation for being clever and quick on his feet. He knows how to ask tough questions without sounding aggressive. Viewers trust him because he has a way of making even the most uncomfortable topics feel manageable. He has interviewed presidents, comedians, and controversial figures, always keeping things calm and under control. So when Meghan Markle was announced as the next guest on his show, no one expected anything out of the ordinary. That evening, the Ed Sullivan Theater looked just like it always did. The lights were bright, the crowd outside was buzzing, and the crew moved with their usual rhythm. But behind the scenes, something felt different. Security was tighter than usual. Staff had been given specific instructions to stay alert. Audience members were told to leave their phones at the entrance, and this time, the checks were more serious. There were whispers in the hallways that something big was about to happen, though no one knew exactly what it was. Meghan arrived with her usual team. Her car pulled up to the back entrance, and within seconds, her entourage guided her through the doors. She looked composed, wearing a dark blue dress that caught the light with every step. Her walk was steady, her expression calm, but people who had seen her before noticed a difference. There was a kind of intensity in her eyes. She was polite, but quiet, focused out as she entered the building. Crew members turned their heads. A few whispered to each other while pretending to check equipment. Someone near the monitors said she had been pacing in the green room, not just once or twice, but over and over for nearly 20 minutes. That was not normal, especially not for Meghan. Stephen was in his dressing room, going over the final notes for the interview. He had prepared carefully. Meghan's public appearances were rare, and this one came with a lot of public interest. The questions were reviewed several times to strike a balance. They had to be respectful, but they also needed to get real answers. No one knew it yet, but this was not going to be a routine promo segment. The tension in the air said it all. Something was brewing, and once the cameras started rolling, there would be no turning back. When the cameras came on and the music played, everything looked like business as usual. Stephen Colbert smiled at the audience, waved to the band, and then turned toward the entrance. "Please welcome Meghan Markle," he said, his voice smooth and professional. Meghan stepped onto the stage with grace. She waved at the crowd, offered a brief smile, and walked confidently toward the guest chair. Her posture was perfect, her outfit flawless. From a distance, it looked like she was in control, but up close, you could see it. The tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned the room before settling on Stephen. She was holding it together, but only just. Stephen stood to greet her. He extended his hand, and she shook it with a warmth that felt more practiced than genuine. As they both sat down, the crowd gave a polite round of applause. Meghan crossed her legs, adjusted her dress slightly, and folded her hands in her lap. "Thank you for being here," Stephen said, keeping his tone light. "It is always interesting when you come on the show." Meghan laughed softly. "Thank you for having me. It is good to be here." The small talk began like it always does. A few friendly comments about New York weather, a quick mention of her upcoming project, but underneath the smiles and polite words, something felt off. Meghan answered the questions smoothly, but her eyes were sharp. She was paying close attention to every word, every shift in Stephen's tone. Stephen nodded, flipping a card in his hand. Then came the first real question. You have made quite a few headlines lately, he said. Some people love what you are doing. Others have a harder time with it. How do you deal with such a wide range of opinions? Meghan's smile tightened, just slightly. She took a breath. When you are trying to change things, she said, not everyone is going to like it. I try to stay focused on what matters. She said the right words, and she said them calmly, but the change in her tone was subtle and clear. This was not going to be a smooth ride. Stephen gave a slight nod, but you could tell he was already preparing for what came next. The room stayed quiet. Everyone was watching, listening, waiting to see where it would go from here. Stephen looked down at his cue cards, then glanced back up with a steady voice. There have been some questions lately, he said. Especially around your charity work, some people are wondering if your approach is really working the way it should. What would you say to those critics? The question sounded measured. Not rude, not aggressive, but it landed hard. Meghan paused for a second, just long enough for the silence to become noticeable. Her posture shifted slightly. Shoulders back, chin lifted just a bit higher. Then she smiled, but this time it did not quite reach her eyes. Well, Stephen, she said, keeping her tone even, it is always interesting to see how people respond when someone does things differently, especially when that someone is a woman, and even more so when she is a woman of color. The room stayed quiet. Meghan's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. When you are trying to make meaningful change, she continued, there will always be those who resist it. That is just part of the process. But I know what I am doing. And I know why I am doing it. Stephen nodded slowly. You could tell he was trying to keep the balance. He had to ask the hard questions, but he also did not want to start a fight. Still, the air was starting to feel heavier. The audience shifted slightly in their seats. A few people leaned forward. Others glanced around. It was subtle, but the vibe had changed. Something had cracked open. Meghan crossed her legs again, more deliberately this time. Her hands rested in her lap, but her fingers tensed for just a second. Her smile had faded. She was still composed, still elegant, but there was a new edge to her presence. Stephen cleared his throat. He looked like he was about to respond, but stopped himself. The room was not laughing anymore, no more polite chuckles, no more easy rhythm. This was the moment when everyone watching realized it was not going to be just another late-night chat. The tension was no longer under the surface. It was there now, in the space between them, quiet but impossible to ignore. And whatever came next, it was clear the conversation had taken a turn no one could walk back from. Meghan leaned forward slightly, her voice low but steady. She looked straight at Stephen, then out toward the audience. You want to talk about criticism? She said, but let us be honest about where that criticism really comes from. I have faced years of headlines questioning my intentions, twisting my words, digging into every part of my life. And let us not pretend it is not about race, because it is. It always has been. The words hit like a wave. The room went still. Stephen kept his expression neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced down at his notes, then looked back up. Meghan, I do not want to dismiss what you are saying, he began, but I have to push back a little. There are legitimate questions being asked. These are concerns raised by credible sources, about the effectiveness of your work, about transparency, about the way public donations are used. Meghan's jaw tightened. She shook her head slowly. And who decides what is legitimate? She asked. Who decides which voices matter? The same media that has tried to paint me as difficult, as angry, as ungrateful. It is the same playbook every time. Stephen kept his tone calm, but he leaned in slightly now. This is not about tearing anyone down, he said. It is about accountability. When someone steps into the public eye and asks for trust, people are going to ask questions. That is not bias. That is how it works. Meghan's voice sharpened. No, Stephen, that is how it works for people the media approves of, for the ones who fit their story. When someone challenges that, suddenly it is a problem. Suddenly it is controversial. The exchange was no longer just uncomfortable. It had become a real clash, the kind that pulls everyone in and refuses to let them look away. Meghan's eyes scanned the audience. Then she stood. The scraping of her chair echoed across the studio. The crew froze. The crowd stopped breathing. Stephen stayed seated. He looked up at her, his voice a little firmer now. Please sit down, he said. We are having a conversation, not a confrontation. But Meghan did not move. No, she said. What we are having is a moment where you get to pretend this is fair, when it is not, when it never has been. The audience was caught in between. Some looked uneasy, others stared with wide eyes. Nobody knew whether to applaud or walk out. This was no longer a talk show. It had turned into something else, a power struggle, a public reckoning, the kind of television that people would be talking about for years. And the most stunning part was not the shouting, it was the silence. The way the air held every word like it was heavy, like it mattered more than anything else being said on television that night. Meghan took a deep breath, her hands resting on her knees. Her voice was calm at first, but her words carried weight. Stephen, I came here because I thought this was going to be an honest conversation, but this does not feel honest. It feels like a performance. Like you already decided what the story was before I even walked out here. Stephen shifted in his seat. His face stayed composed, but his eyes were more serious now. I am doing my job, he said. Asking questions is part of that, especially when the public has real concerns. This is not personal. This is journalism. Meghan leaned forward, her tone sharper now. Is it journalism when the questions are all built to push one narrative? When I am not given a fair chance to talk about the work I have done? When I am interrupted and challenged, but rarely supported? Stephen sat back slightly. I would ask these questions to anyone sitting in that chair, he replied. It is not about who you are. It is about what you represent to the public. People want to know where their support is going. Meghan's voice rose, just a little. Would you really ask these same questions if I were someone else? If I looked different, talked different, wore a crown? The audience murmured. You could feel the tension growing thicker with every word. Stephen spoke more carefully now. I have interviewed politicians, celebrities, activists, of all kinds. I ask tough questions because I think people deserve answers. That is all this is. Meghan stood, slowly this time. Her tone was no longer just frustrated. It was deeply personal. No, that is not all this is. This is a setup. Your producers reached out with a list of topics. This interview was supposed to be about my foundation, the school programs, the Clean Water Project. Not about rumors, not about gossip columns, not about tearing me apart for entertainment. Stephen stood too. He did not shout, but his voice carried through the studio. This is what the public needs to hear, the truth, not just the polished version, not just the press releases. Meghan took a step forward. She was not backing down. Then where is your truth? Stephen, where is the part where you admit that this is not just about public interest, that it is also about views, headlines, and viral moments? That having me here was a chance to stir the pot and get people talking. The cameras zoomed in. The control room was frozen. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, caught between two forces too powerful to look away from. Stephen's voice lowered, but it stayed steady. You are a public figure with influence. People listen to you. That means you need to be willing to answer the hard questions. Meghan shook her head. No. What it means is that you have decided I owe you something. That I have to prove myself over and over again just to be seen as human. That because I speak up, I should be taken down. Her voice cracked slightly, but she held her ground. I am not here to be your example. I am not here to be your lesson. And in that moment, it was clear something had broken. The line between the public and the private, between conversation and confrontation, between questioning and accusation. The interview was no longer just uncomfortable. It had become something raw, something real, something that would not be forgotten. Meghan paused at the edge of the stage. Her hand hovered by the microphone, and her eyes scanned the studio one last time. The audience was still frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even the crew stood locked in place, waiting for what would come next. She looked back at Stephen, her voice quiet but steady. You wanted a moment, right? You got it. You wanted something unforgettable, something that would get played over and over. Well, here it is. Then she turned and walked off stage. The sound of her heels echoed across the floor like a closing door. No music played, no applause followed, just silence. Stephen stood there, still behind his desk. His mouth opened slightly, as if he had something to say, but nothing came out. He looked toward the audience, then toward the wings. Then down at his desk. The cards in front of him were useless now. A producer in the control room shouted into a headset, "Go to commercial," but nobody moved. It was as if the entire building was holding its breath. Security met Meghan at the hallway. They did not say much. She nodded at them once, her face composed. They escorted her through the backstage corridors and out a side entrance, where a black car was already waiting. Inside the studio, the lights stayed up. The cameras kept rolling. The control room flipped between angles, unsure which shot to hold. Some techs whispered about cutting the feed, others said to let it play. It was chaos behind the scenes. Meanwhile, people were already talking. Clips of the confrontation started hitting social media within minutes. Short videos, quotes, screenshots, Meghan trending, Stephen trending. Every major outlet picking it up before the show even ended. Twitter lit up with hashtags. She walked off, he crossed the line. Everyone had an opinion. Some defended her, some defended him, but no one ignored it. Back on the stage, Stephen finally stood. He looked into the audience, then into the main camera. Well, he said quietly, that did not go how we planned it. The audience stayed silent. He looked down again, then back up, his expression unreadable. We will be right back. And the screen finally faded to black. Within hours of the taping, the internet exploded. Clips from the interview were everywhere. Some were only a few seconds long, just enough to show Meghan raising her voice or Stephen leaning forward with that sharp look in his eyes. Others were longer, unedited segments that showed the whole exchange, from the rising tension to the moment she walked off stage. Tweets started flooding in. Some people praised Meghan for standing her ground. Others called her defensive or too sensitive. Polls popped up online, asking, was Stephen fair, or did Meghan go too far? The public was completely split. By the next morning, every major outlet was covering it. Cable news, digital media, talk radio. Some called it the most dramatic moment in late-night history. Others called it a breakdown in civility. But nobody ignored it. Stephen did not release a statement that night. The official account of the show just posted a still frame with the caption, "Tonight was different." That was all. His silence only added to the noise. People kept waiting for a full response, but it did not come right away. Meanwhile, Meghan's team moved fast. A written statement came out within 12 hours. It said she was disappointed by the tone of the interview and felt misled about the nature of the appearance. The message was calm but firm. It emphasized the emotional toll of public life and called for more thoughtful conversations about women in leadership. The debate took on a bigger shape. Was this about journalism or a setup? Was Stephen doing his job or crossing a line? And more than anything, people talked about race and gender. Was Meghan treated differently because she is a woman of color? Would a white celebrity have faced the same tone? The questions were heavy. The answers were not simple, but everyone had something to say, and the moment just kept growing. In the end, the dust has not really settled. What happened between Meghan Markle and Stephen Colbert was more than just a heated interview. It struck a nerve, because it brought up questions people have been arguing about for years. Stephen stood firm on the idea of public accountability. He believed that when someone steps into the spotlight, especially when they lead major initiatives or ask for public support, they need to be willing to answer tough questions. He said this was not about tearing anyone down. It was about being honest, fair, and clear with the public. Meghan pushed back with just as much force. For her, this was not just an interview. It was a reminder of all the ways she had been questioned, doubted, and picked apart since the moment she entered the public eye. She argued that her work, her struggles, and her identity had been treated like a spectacle. She felt this moment was no different. She spoke from pain and personal history. He spoke from a sense of journalistic duty. Some viewers say Stephen crossed the line. Others say he just said what many people were already thinking. And that is the debate that is still happening across dinner tables, group chats, and comment sections around the world. So here is the real question. Was Meghan Markle unfairly ambushed? Or did Stephen Colbert just ask the questions the world was already thinking? Let us know what you believe happened that night. Were the questions fair? Was the reaction justified? Or did both sides simply crash into a bigger truth about what public life demands? Make sure to subscribe for more breakdowns of the biggest moments that shape our culture. We dig deep so you get the full story, not just the headline. And drop a comment below. We are reading every single one. Your voice matters.